Are you on the fence about whether you should vote in the 2024 election? Well, stay tuned. We're going to give you 4 very strong and compelling reasons why you do, in fact, need to get out and vote. Hello, and welcome to the Chaplain's Corner After Hours, a place to discuss stories the mainstream media ignores that can actually impact our Christian walk and our spiritual journey. Chaplain Warren and Chaplain Nan are your hosts, and we're glad to have you with us. We have an interesting story in front of us today from CBN News titled, "More than 30 million Christians could sit out the 2024 presidential election." According to the story, upwards of 104 million people of faith, including some 32 million self-identified Christians who regularly attend church services, are expected to sit out of the 2024 presidential election. They are likely to hold back from the November 5th contest due to a lack of interest, according to new data from Arizona Christian University's Cultural Research Center, operated by evangelical pollster George Barna. Voter enthusiasm, the study found, decreased significantly from 20 to 2024. Well, maybe that has something to do with the conditions that have changed from 2020 to 2024. The research study asked people who indicated they were not likely to vote to explain the reasons for that choice, wrote the researchers. The most common reason offered by 2/3 of the non-voters was a lack of interest in politics and elections. Now that's just incredible to me, since politics and elections have very definite consequences for people's lives. You're saying that you're not interested? In another point, more than half of the survey respondents said they dislike both the leading candidates, Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump. And this part really gets me. 55% said they don't feel either candidate reflects their values. Well, now that raises a question. What are their values? What are they looking for? What do they expect out of the country? What do they expect out of their leadership? Anyway, researchers reportedly believe that if the survey's findings prove true on Election Day, Trump's re-election is less likely, and Harris could more than easily pull off a victory. George Barna is encouraging pastors and ministry leaders to use their positions to urge churchgoers to practice their civic duty by casting their ballots on November 5th. They suggest that when stepping into the ballot box, Bible believers are urged to consider constitutional principles like life, liberty, and property. I just think a story like this is just beyond understanding. We live in a country that was designed for power by the people, and that power is exercised through the ballot box, through our votes. And to, on one hand, say I'm not interested in any of that, but then later on perhaps start to complain about the way things are, seems to be a complaint without any merit. And to simply say, I don't like the two candidates that are on the ballot, while being a valid point, doesn't necessarily relieve a person, I think, from the duty to, in fact, go vote. Because although you may not like the two of them, you certainly must have an opinion about the issues they're running on and which set of issues speaks most closely to your values. And then you might want to think about, well, what are your values? I mean, how many people out in the electorate, for example, are interested in seeing God eliminated from the walks of human life? How many people out there are interested in the active destruction of the family unit? And how many people out there are rooting for the destruction of private property ownership? Now, if that's a majority of the voters out there, then there's a candidate there in the election who embraces those views. On the other hand, if you object to those three objectives or values, there's another candidate out there who, although you may not like his personality and the way he says things and the way he does tweets and all that, the fact of the matter is he and the platform of his party actually oppose all those other three things. So to say you have no interest is just hard to fathom. What do you think?
Well, you said a lot of things. I was kind of perusing your points here. So I thought Trump did a great job outing evangelical lack of citizenship, which Holy Scripture does instruct us to be part of. So but he's the first person that actually brought up such a large segment of the population of evangelical Christians. And I would say the Catholic universe that just, I don't know where they live. But anyhow, so I thought it was very, because of his too big to rig main strategy, I thought a great component for a tactic was to go after those segments of the population that not just him, but that never vote or don't vote, even way back before the quote unquote moral majority enterprise, which makes a lot of money, by the way, off the backs of these evangelicals who are too faithful to vote, but they make money off of them. Even before that there was this very, substantial enough to win an election, enough to move the dial of an election from the point of the campaign to win it. So I thought getting that message out way early got a lot of people talking like what we're doing right now. And I mean, I've been hearing that buzz for a while now from the podiums of the rallies of the different speakers, congressmen, people who have spoken or who are campaigning in some way, who are addressing that little segment. It got so tactically strategic that they even, have you heard about the raw milk government debacle with the farmers, especially in Pennsylvania?
Well, yeah, they're not allowed to sell raw milk to consumers.
Correct. And who are most of those farmers?
Well, they're going to be small farmers.
They're going to be the Amish.
Well, okay.
And so that was, I mean, that's not all the farmers are Amish, but a lot of the Amish farming economy, if you will, came from things like raw milk and things that were like pure food instead of government regulated other than food, food. And so what they discovered was that sliver of pie of the Amish not voting traditionally because they were so sequestered in their own culture. Trump has broken that barrier because of those trials. It's kind of at least I think in modern times, the first time the Amish were targeted by the government in that way. And so a blowback to that, what happened is that they've taken the opportunity to make the case that you live in the United States, and if you want to survive, if you want your family and your farm to survive, you had better vote because you have the right to vote. They left originally Europe because they didn't have rights and they wanted rights. So here they've had them, but they've pretty much just kept, I don't want to say sequestered, I don't know another word, that they've kept themselves to
they've kept themselves segregated and,
right.
and purposefully separated from everyone else.
So that's just one little segment of these non-voting Christian groups. And I'm making a point of it because an opportunity arose with the trials, which was teed up by not by the conservative voter or the conservative campaign, but by the just coming down so harshly on small business, as you well said, farmers, and literally putting them out of business. And I wonder why, who gained from that other than big agri, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So that's just one sliver. Then you have the other sliver, which is a much bigger across America piece of the pie. And that was the quote unquote evangelical vote. So I was surprised, were you, that a large percentage don't vote?
Yeah, there's a large percentage that just claims. As a matter of fact, I saw a comment on a social media site just today about someone just outraged that politics has been talked about in their church. And while, we don't preach politics, politics is just a part of life. Politics is part of the glue that holds a civilized society together. And, it's either hand in hand with our religious beliefs, or it's complementary to our religious beliefs, or it's a consequence of life, but it's there. And if we don't take the opportunity to shape politics and the consequences of politics in a way that aligns with the gospel, other forces are going to come in to fill the vacuum and take politics in another direction, which does no one any good and historically causes horrendous human suffering.
So you make a great point about that. I was I was just surprised that there was such a large contingency of people who consider themselves, upright, good citizens, and fail in their number one duty. So as I've looked at Holy Scripture, in particular the Gospels, I contend Jesus gives us one instruction about being his disciple or follower and how to handle the government. And he only gives one instruction, and that is pay unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. He does not say, don't pay your taxes, disobey, don't participate, stay out of it because it stinks. He just says, do what civil authorities have imbued into how a government is run. He doesn't make a hate the Romans, he doesn't make an opinion about politics, but he does give that one instruction. To me, since he doesn't give a lot of instruction about it, unfortunately, it'd be a lot easier if we had a lot of Holy Scripture to point to about what Jesus Christ in particular in the Gospels says about it. So that's one thing. But to me, the bigger piece is, it just seems to me that I made a note right there while you were talking. I don't pass judgment like people are bad because they don't do that. I think they're poorly instructed. So I think two things are at play in what you just said about the church does not want politics in it. No, we don't want a new idol in the church, right? God, it's about God. but it's also about how to live. And so if things are happening around us that are instructing us and our children and grandchildren how not to live, then it is our duty. I mean, Jesus did go into the temple and overthrow he went in and threw over the tables, right? So he did, I wouldn't say political things, but he did moral things. And so this morning, I cannot think of his name, the priest who really led the charge for the Catholic Church for the right to life, who got kicked out by Pope Francis. I have no comment about that or no opinion about that. But today, he made a whole statement about apparently because Trump is saying that it's up to the states and he's not coming down and being like the judge on the Supreme. In other words, it's like people don't understand how the government works and thinks because he's going to be president, he's like he's also a Supreme Court judge who's going to flip and make things so. He's not. He's the president and he has certain powers and duties. Anyhow, so because of the dislike that he came out and said it belongs to the states in order for it not to be a presidential election topic, and then he came out for IVF, apparently now we have a group of Catholics that are saying they're going to sit out. And I'm thinking, really? So the priest made, I wish I could remember his name, he made the comment that by not voting, you are making you are morally responsible then for what happens as a consequence of your not voting.
Well, yeah, I think it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer who said not to act is to act.
Right. So it's kind of in that vein, but he put the onus more on that you are now morally responsible, so that if you think you're being morally responsible because you can't bring yourself to vote for a person or the whole Congress and the Senate because they're aligned not exactly according to your religious view, that you are morally responsible for not voting just as you are for voting. So in other words, you're not off the hook. So I think it's a lot of hand-wringing because I think people are like being taught from the pulpit that in other words, well, two things I think are in play for these folks. And I haven't really talked to a lot of people. Have you? Do you know a lot of people who said they're not voting?
I've talked to one in particular.
So I'd be really curious, do you perceive that person to be well informed about the history of the found, like why we exist as the United States, like how we came to be, where we came from, and why we have our Constitution the way it is?
Probably. It's a very educated person. And my reply to him, and this starts to lead me towards a conclusion of this, but... So
before you say what your conclusion is, I was going to ask you about this person.
Okay.
Why is it that if they're well educated, in other words, they're well informed, I think a lot of people are so ill informed and they buy into church and state should be separate. So that was kind of where I was going with it. If he understands church and state are not separate, that's not how our country was founded, nor is the Constitution laid out that way. So if that's not his reason for not voting, then what is his reason for not voting?
His stated reason was he just didn't like either of the candidates.
So he does not feel morally responsible to vote?
I don't think so. And as a matter of fact, his statement about not voting followed an article that he wrote and published in a church journal. And it was talking about the election, and it took in my opinion, it took a very fatalistic type of approach or view of the election that, there are bigger things in play than just single votes, and there's trajectories that are happening, and so we just need to pray and be religious, and and not to get so caught up in the things of the world, because one of the Christian beliefs is that we're in the world, but we're not of the world. And I told him, I said, your article was nicely written, but it sounds very fatalistic, and that we have no responsibility for the world around us. And those two views are not Christian views.
So as you were speaking, thank you for answering the question. So as you were speaking, I was reminded of a classmate who I'd never really quite thought of our world and ourselves this way, but made a big point of that one of the foundations, let's put it that way, of how God created us and created his salvific work is down to one thing, and that's incarnational. So there's no separating us spiritually from our worldly life. And that voting, the civic world, is part of, in other words, you can't, like you said, you're in the world, you're not of the world, but you're not, I can't think of the heresy of people that thought you had to be, like your body didn't count and the world was like all evil, and Jesus Christ came and he was completely incarnational, and he calls us to be incarnational. We're spirit and body. And so we have to do those things of the body. So anyhow, I just was wondering why he thought he was exempt from responsibility to vote. And also, I would believe a certain group of people believe in sort of the spiritual, I call it the spiritual conspiracy. I need to do nothing. It's all up to God because everything's so bad. He's got a plan and I just have to let it play out. Instead of incarnationally, God yoked himself to us and he told Adam, go till the field.
We are part of the plan.
Correct. Anyhow.
So after I'd considered what this friend said, I wrote back to him and I said, I kind of figured you would come to this place after I read your article. And so I want to offer 4 reasons to you to vote. And the first reason is it's your responsibility. Whether you like this country or not, you receive the bounty of this country. And that bounty that you receive was won for you by patriots who shed their blood and gave their lives for the formation of this country. And that bounty you receive is sustained by other patriots who have served in our military and served in government service and often paid the highest price in order to maintain that bounty. And so you owe them that to go vote. That's your job. The second thing is you have a real choice. And it doesn't matter if you like one of the candidates and don't like the other, or you don't like both of them. The fact of the matter is you have a choice. And here's the choice in 2024. The Democrat Party represents the culture of death. Abortion, sexual perversion, out-of-control spending, open borders, destruction of the middle class, economic mismanagement, all of those are issues that lead to death. That's the logical end for the Democratic platform on those issues. The Republican platform, on the other hand, is a platform of hope, economically, and in terms of world relations, in terms of the integrity of the country, in terms of prosperity. And that platform is for all people, whether you agree with Republicans or not, or whether, whatever your mode of life is, that platform is for everyone. The third factor is leadership. Kamala Harris, if she won the election, is no more going to be president of the United States than Joe Biden has been. This is simply going to be Obama's fourth term so that he can continue the destructive work he started in 2008. And then finally, this is about the future of the country and the future generations who will live here. You know, do you want men to be able to be men? Do you want women to be able to be women as they were both created by God? Or in particular, do you want your women to be under the thumb of radical feminism where they can't be women and where men parading as women can dominate them in sports and in other places of their life? So in fact, the 2024 election has consequences, and they have consequences of eschatological-like magnitude. And so for all these reasons, I think you need to get out and vote. And I pass that message on to the 30 million Christians and the 104 million religious or faithful of different faiths who think that it's all right to sit on their hands this year. Thank you for being with us today. Just remember, God is in control, and we know how the story ends.